Is the deep state mafia setting up a massive cyber attack false flag on the American people that will disrupt the 2024 election? Well, it turns out that the United States intel agencies have been running tabletop exercises on this exact scenario. And now the Department of Homeland Security head Myorikas says the greatest cyber threat to America is something called Kill Ware. So what's really going on here? Are we being set up for a massive false flag? And investigative journalist Whitney Webb has been writing about these cyber attack tabletop exercises for years, and she's been exposing what they've been up to. And then this week we had a crazy quote-unquote cyber attack that seemed to shut down half the internet this week. Banks and Rumble was down. And what exactly is going on here? Are we being played like a fiddle? Whitney Webb joins us right now. Whitney, when you saw this big cyber attack unfolding this week, did you say, oh, here we go? Or is this maybe perhaps totally unrelated to your investigations?
Well, I would keep in mind, for those that may not remember, a few years ago, the head of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, talked about a cyber pandemic, right?
Right.
Which implied that that there was to be in the near future what he described as something having significantly worse consequences for people worldwide than COVID. That was going to be, a cyber pandemic, meaning a series of cyber attacks. So I think that's essentially what's being foreshadowed here. And I think, we're if we follow some other WEF warnings, like we talked about last time, it's quite possible that we'll be seeing an escalation of what we've seen just this past week. But what matters also, and what doesn't get enough coverage, in my opinion, is how the attribution of who's allegedly responsible for these attacks. So if you look at the recent news that allege that some Chinese military linked group called Volt Typhoon was embedded in U.S. national infrastructure. The only sources for that cited in those reports as to why that group is deemed to be Chinese, and the only groups allegedly finding them in these national systems of critical importance nationally are groups like mafia, as we talked about last time, helped create the CTI League. And also the CISA agency, their longtime head, though I don't think he's head anymore, but he was head at the time that agency was created, Chris Krebs, is former head of cybersecurity at Microsoft. And Microsoft also has a lot of connections to Cyber Reason, a group that's been doing a lot of these tabletop simulations that you referred to earlier. And then the other group besides Microsoft is called Recorded Future, and they were created with seed funding from Google Ventures and the CIA's In-Q-Tel. And they rarely, if ever, provide any direct evidence as to why a group is, Chinese or Iranian or North Korean or Russian. A lot of these groups, including, more notorious ones that blame stuff on Russian hackers during like the 2016 elections, like, CrowdStrike, for example, more often than not, they don't give any actual evidence. They say, we suspect, or this group behaves similarly to a group that is, of these various nationalities. And we need evidence, especially since WikiLeaks release of Vault 7, that the CIA and affiliated intelligence agencies in Five Eyes and beyond can blame any nation state they want by placing false fingerprints of various nation state actors in attacks, cyber attacks they actually conduct themselves. And the importance of that, when you're talking about attribution, is that, who's to blame for this catastrophic cyber attack? And it's very possible to have, an extreme psyop conducted on the American population that could push us into, World War III, which I think, the risk of that is much clearer to people now than it was even, a few months ago.
Yeah, Colonel Douglas McGregor on our show has openly pointed out he believes that they may end up canceling the 2024 election, that martial law will be put in place, that there will be some sort of move to push Biden into a martial law situation. The 2024 election would be canceled in some capacity, and it will be totally controlled. And of course, your reporting with these tabletop exercises seems to suggest that this need for martial law would come as a result of a massive cyber attack. So can you talk about these tabletop exercises and what these agencies have been planning? And I mean, it's amazing to me that they're literally planning it. They've got the paperwork. They've been running the operations. This is not a conspiracy theory. They're laying the groundwork for this.
Yes. So the exact scenario which Colonel McGregor discussed on your show has been simulated for years by the FBI, DHS, and various police departments, not just in the U.S., but also I believe they had one in the United Kingdom as well. And the company responsible for this is based in Boston. They're called Cybereason. They're a cybersecurity company with very overt ties to Israeli intelligence. And essentially what they conducted in this simulation was an attack on the election, but it wasn't an attack on election infrastructure. It was an attack on critical infrastructure, and also things like hacking traffic lights to cause accidents and kill people in car accidents, hacking self-driving cars to run over people waiting in line to vote, and hacking power grid and all sorts of things like that. So why are they conducting simulations supposedly about election security, but there was nothing about voting machines or, election infrastructure at all? It was about just murdering innocent people and destroying critical infrastructure or, jamming it essentially. And then, not that long after, the head of DHS, Alexander Myorikas, said that this exact type of hacks, which he referred to as Kill Ware, is going to be the next big cyber attack. Which of course is deeply unsettling. And even more unsettling is that Cybereason, the head of Cybereason, Lear Capital, says that his work at Cybereason is a direct continuation of his service to Israel's Signal Intelligence Agency, Unit 8200. And while there, Lear Capital specialized in offensive cyber attacks targeting other nations, not unlike Ohad Zaydenberg of the CTI League. And it's important to mind that the head of the WEF, Partnership Against Cybercrime, that's leading this push for a regulated internet due to a coming cyber attack on critical infrastructure and the financial system, is an Israeli intelligence operative named Tal Goldstein that essentially created the model by which the companies that Ohad Zaydenberg and also Lear Capital, Cybereason, follow essentially, basically, the policy Goldstein created back in 2012, while Netanyahu was prime minister back then, and of course still is now, is that Israeli cybersecurity operation, or cyber operations that were previously conducted by Mossad or other Israeli intelligence agencies that used to be done in-house are now going to be done through private companies. And that same year, for example, 2012 is when Cybereason was created by Lear Capital, who says that his Cybereason is a direct continuation of his work at Unit 8200, which was offensive attacks on other nations. So just really crazy when you again consider what we talked about last time, that Israeli intelligence has a deliberate policy of getting the U.S. to preemptively, or at least attack Iran first when they want to bring in a regional war into the fore. So
it's incredibly troubling. We think about when we know that they can place digital footprints, digital fingerprints on anything, and they can claim that, oh, it's Iran. Yep. The reason all of your banks are down, you can't get access to your monies because, Iran just launched a massive cyber attack. And we're telling you that that's the case because Israeli intelligence is telling us. How can we believe them at all? And then what are we to do? Launch some massive military strike against Iran?
And this is why evidence matters, because all of the companies essentially up to now that are being reported in mainstream media as the ones attributing blame to these nation states are either funded directly by the CIA or Unit 8200 or people related to these intelligence agencies.
People, wake up.
And we need better evidence than that.
Wake up. I mean, I hope people are paying attention to this, and people can yell and say whatever they want. They can say, that's anti-Semitic, whatever. Go, jump off a bridge. That's ridiculous. Like, these people are funded by these intelligence agencies. You are not stupid. Please, people, wake up and pay attention to what they're doing. And you're seeing, of course, runs on banks. You're seeing people concerned about how are they going to be able to get cash. They're driving us away from cash. They're driving us towards a central bank digital currency. They're driving us away or towards digital and away from cash. You already see what the European Central Bank is doing to limit your ability to use cash. You will be considered a terrorist on the gray market if you use more than, I think it's what, 1,000 euros for a transaction. That comes right out of the mouth of Christine Lagarde. That's policy now. So I think you're starting to see the scarcity of cash, and then of course the concerns about getting access to your digital banks. Very, very troubling if they can manipulate all of that with the flip of a switch.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely very disturbing. And the only way to get people to agree to give away all of those freedoms is to have them scared and panicked about something. And again, like we talked about last time, I think the extreme involvement of banks in a lot of these simulations, whether it's Cyber Polygon or other things that are similar that went on through this WEF partnership against cybercrime or the Carnegie Endowments. Equivalent program, it's very they know that things are going to get bad in the financial system, and they don't want to be to blame this time, at least publicly, what they were in 2008. So what better way to not only absolve yourself of blame and be able to blame some faceless hacker, but also push for the predetermined solution that you want to impose on people, than having this cyber attack where we have to have a completely regulated internet and have to be able to tie people's digital IDs to everything they do online. And then, of course, to their money as well, because it's not just a push for ending online anonymity. It's a completely related push to ending financial anonymity as well. And we're seeing this also with major efforts of the DOJ, a member of the WEF partnership against cybercrime, to go after all of these crypto exchanges to surveil people's transactions there more than ever before. I mean, if you look at what happened with the recent settlement with Binance, now the U.S. government can surveil transactions to an extreme degree compared to how it was before. And I think that's likely to keep progressing as some of these new policies promoted that are being sought by the U.S. Treasury, for example, get approved. There's not just there's a coming push to push all of our money into the digital realm, and it's happening alongside an unprecedented push to surveil that digital money. So people need to be very aware that there's a lot of Orwellian solutions that are going to be pushed in the wake of this apparently coming cyber attack, aside from the war angle. And it's a very deeply unsettling situation. But to go back to these simulations for a second, I mentioned the things that they talked about doing, but I did forget to say that what they concluded was that there was going to be the election canceled and martial law declared. Essentially what they were doing in that simulation was finding the precise things that needed to happen in order to trigger that response.
So what were the precise
why
things?
Why is DHS and the FBI studying that with this company tied to Israeli intelligence, which, by the way, is heavily partnered with Lockheed Martin and has access to a lot of U.S. military systems directly because of that partnership.
So let's be precise then. What specifically, as a part of the Cyber Reason tabletop exercises, did the FBI and the intelligence community put together that said these certain items need to happen in order for martial law to take place, President Biden to become, dictator, basically, cancel an election? What precise things would have to happen in these tabletop exercises through this cyber attack?
Well, these simulations happened during the Trump administration, back around the time of the 2020 election. And essentially, it was a team composed of employees from Cyber Reason, almost all of which were veterans of this particular intelligence service. And the people that were trying to defend against these cyber attacks in the simulation were DHS and the FBI. So essentially, you had Cyber Reason employees gauging the reaction in order to obtain this particular outcome. But again, you have Alexander Myorikas, after the simulation takes place, saying that same exact type of attack, these Kill Ware attacks, are going to be the next big thing. And
but what would trigger? But what would trigger? What would trigger something that would rise to the level of martial law? I mean, it happened at the tail end of the Trump administration, so now it's under the Biden administration, and then we're heading into the 2024 election. Is it electric grid collapses? Banking system collapses or is blocked, and that's what would trigger it. What would trigger it?
So in these particular simulations, it didn't even go that far. It was much small. It was things like, again, the hacking of self-driving cars, of traffic lights, and a lot of emphasis on social media and misinformation.
So it's
of
that small?
course,
It's just traffic lights and misinformation.
causing panic and fear and people being run over by self-driving cars, which, by the way, Vice did an investigation where they interviewed people from Unit 8200 several years ago about how simple it is to hack not just self-driving cars, but anyone's car.
Well, I was a part of a big investigation. We went out to Pittsburgh and I sat with hackers who managed to hack into these cars, and I drove one of these vehicles, and I was driving it, had total control myself. And then they remotely took control of the car and ran me right into a ditch for this, to show us that they could take total control of the car. And we had it all on camera, and we filmed the whole thing, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't control the wheel. I couldn't do anything. They ran me right off the road, and it was for a segment we were filming it and trying to understand how this technology worked. They almost ran me right into a tree, by the way, and they later apologized for it. But we were speeding. We were going pretty fast, and it ran me right off almost into a tree in a ditch. So yeah, they can do this if they want. And this was 8 years ago. Imagine how sophisticated the technology is now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's definitely disturbing stuff. I wish more people would be paying attention to this, particularly the attribution side, and how extensively this has been gamed out by our national security agencies, think tanks tied to national security, and a lot of these contractors either tied to U.S. or Israeli intelligence. And in talking about all this stuff, I'm certainly not trying at all to pick on Israel, but what I do want to emphasize is that a lot of conservatives specifically have a blind spot here. Israel, just like the US, has a deep state, and it has for a very, very long time. And if you go back to events like Iran-Contra and every sort of CIA scandal, essentially, from then on, the Israeli and American deep states collaborate very, very frequently on all sorts of things. And I think that's likely what we're seeing here as well in terms of this buildup. And it's, again, incredibly unsettling. And I do want to make clear, too, that both the American deep state and the Israeli deep state have no problems killing their own people to get what they want and advance their ultimate goal of more power and control and money for themselves.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. We've seen that. Well, they will kill presidents of the United States. We know that they've done that as well, JFK. I'll get you out of here on this, Whitney, which is this week we saw this massive cyber attack, if you want to call it that. Where do you think the fingerprints there lie with this cyber attack this week as you're studying how this thing was unfolding this week and listening to the media's response to it? We were told China.
Are you referring to the one that was blamed on China, or the one on Rumble that you also mentioned? Okay, so as far as I read about the China...
Yeah, I think it was connected because it was the same day. Rumble was attacked, Netflix was down, banks were being hit, allegedly. But yeah, we were hearing immediately it's China.
Yeah, so, again, I only really read the articles, I believe, that were put up by the Washington Post that got a lot of circulation on those attacks. I unfortunately didn't have time to dig too deeply into all of the reporting on it. But in those particular articles, it didn't talk about so much what the alleged attacks were more that it was a lot of probing, or that they were embedded in national infrastructure seen there, this particular group, which again they referred to as Volt Typhoon. And the article itself was mostly people from think tanks or former national security talking about Chinese hackers, and there was really very little substance as far as to what the actual attacks or probing were, and how they know that Volt Typhoon is affiliated with China, and essentially nothing on why they believe it's affiliated with China. And again, what was said about what they were actually doing came from this group, Recorded Future, which was created with CIA money. And then this other, and then Microsoft, which again is deeply embedded with the CTI League, Cyber Reason, all other sorts of stuff. And, obviously through its affiliation with people like Bill Gates is definitely a big part of the push for, globalism more broadly, and all other sorts of things. And it's important to keep in mind that Microsoft is a major contractor for the U.S. national security state, and also for the Israeli national security state.
And now Ukraine.
And want to have their software put on all voting machines. It's called Election Guard. I wrote about that software back for Mint Press News a few years ago. And it's directly affiliated with NewsGuard, the censorship engine that's been under fire and I think recently sued by some big names as of late.
Yeah.
If NewsGuard was engaged in malfeasance, do you think Election Guard won't be? I would be kind of naive.
Right. No, Election Guard's going to save us. Exactly. Oh, boy. I mean, George Orwell he just must be rolling over. It's unbelievable. Whitney Webb, as always, thank you so much. I encourage all of our viewers to go and read Whitney's great website. It's unlimitedhangout.com, right? Have I got the URL correct? Unlimitedhangout.com.
Yep.
You can check Whitney's great reporting and investigations, following the money. And so hopefully people wake up when they hear these stories, when they read a Washington Post story, they understand where this money is coming from. Whitney, great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me again. Take care.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.